Welcome to another episode of Destination Linux Podcast.
Welcome to episode 80 of Destination Linux. I'm Rocco, and with us this week is Zeb. PZ, what's going on?
Hiya, and you'll be happy to know that I did not extreme distro hop this week.
Thank goodness, Zeb. Thank
I'm
goodness.
on the ever reliable peppermint.
And there is Michael, the Thread Ripper.
The Thread Ripper.
You'll have to watch Biddle to find out that inside info. And we have a special guest, Marc Di Luzio. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks.
Well, before we start, we wanted to say that Ryan is not with us this week because he had some pretty powerful storms go through his area, and he has lost power. Everybody is okay. Him and the family are okay, but they are without internet and without normal amenities. But we hopefully will see him back next week. But for those that don't know, Mark, you were the former Linux group lead for Feral Interactive.
Yeah. It's a bit of a weird title, but basically like a lead developer for Linux. That sounds more fancy than it is because the Linux team, never really got bigger than maybe 5 to 6 focused people. But that was what I used to do at Feral.
Nice. Well, Feral does a lot of great work in the Linux community, so that's much appreciated. But you are currently working for Unity?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you live in a 5-rat household. So on your Twitter, you have a couple pictures of your family members, pets, however you want to say it.
Yeah. I got 5 of them. I mean, I had 3 originally. I had 2 when I was younger, like at university. I got a pair, and then obviously rats don't live for more than a couple of years. So they passed away like 5 years ago or something. And then last year we got 3 more. And then a couple of months ago we got a couple of little ones. They're great though.
Okay, I'll take your word for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, come on, like what's Liam from Gaming on Linux? You've had him on. He's got rats.
Yeah, he does.
He's got 4.
Is it an English thing?
I don't think so. It's definitely one of those, like, they're a pet that a lot of people find weird, right? Because rats, like the plague and crap like that. But I mean, if you think about them being like slightly smaller ferrets, and they're like pack animals in a way, so that they're incredible.
Rats are actually cleaner than ferrets, which is,
Yeah.
Realize that.
They're super clean. And apart from the freaky tail that a lot of people get weirded out by. I've been brought one to show you.
All right, let's see it.
Nice.
There you go.
Oh my!
So
it is adorable.
He's cute.
Yeah. He's cute.
I think rats get a bad rep. They're actually adorable.
Yeah, they're really nice.
And they're surprisingly friendly. My sister had a pet rat, and like you said, it only lasted about 3 years, I think. But no, it never used to bite you. Never used to do anything nasty. It would just come up from the patch, and that was it.
They'll basically they would never bite at all. I don't think they've ever done anything aggressive towards me at all. They're like the friendliest little buggers ever. I mean, look at this guy.
Yeah. That little ratatouille.
Yeah, exactly. He's got a little dot on his head too. There you go. We can't hold a scrambling rat for an hour.
All right. So in your Twitter pictures, and let me just say, I wasn't stalking you. Ryan was actually stalking you through your Twitter media files.
Blame it on the guy who's not here.
I'm telling you. But you have pictures of E3 as well. So what was your favorite showing in E3 this year?
So I don't know. I think actually this year's E3 was, for me at least, pretty weak. I think there was nothing show-stopping that really made me jump up and be like, yeah, that's great. I think
you aren't excited for the videos of gameplay that is not actual gameplay and it's never not even happen at all.
Well, this is the problem, and like E3 has been kind of co-opted into that stuff, right? Like it's so full of just people bigging up games that aren't really ready or
it's a big press conference at this point.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think I was excited to see a sequel to Doom 2016. That looked good. Well, did we see anything of it? I don't think we did.
No.
But we heard about it.
We saw a logo.
Yeah, that's and a title. Which, I mean, to be honest, it's Doom. What do you need to know, really? But
Right.
more of the same game would be enough for me. And seeing CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk 2077 actually like shown to some extent was exciting as well. So that was cool. But yeah, nothing really jumped out massively.
Yeah, that's kind of like
what's E3 like as a show? Is it hectic or?
I've never been. I think there's a big show floor where like loads of developers and stuff are around. But it used to be was it a press only and developer only event? So like you couldn't get like a show pass as a member of the public. And then about, I think 5 years ago, it sort of changed and transitioned, and now it's still kind of a press-only event, but there's some show floor stuff.
It was actually, people used to say it was better when it was just developer-focused or press-focused, because it was like they weren't trying to sell stuff to you immediately.
Yeah.
But,
it wasn't like, it didn't feel like a giant, press release, like you said, right? Like it
Right.
felt a bit more interesting.
Good. So tell us about your Linux journey. When did you first start using Linux?
So I actually had to check this because I was pretty sure I was going to get that question. So I first started using Linux at school. That would have been, years ago. But it was Ubuntu. And actually one of my, I don't know, he wasn't that close a friend then, but he's an acquaintance friend, started a sort of Linux club to teach his friends and me and other people about Linux, and that was kind of my first introduction. And then I started building my own computers and stuff, and at that point pirating Windows seemed like a bad idea, so I installed Ubuntu on them, and I think that was Ubuntu 4 or maybe Ubuntu 6, one of the two.
So when your friend introduces you to this group, are you excited to join this group, or are you like, what is this stuff all about?
I think it was a lot more like the second, to be honest. I mean, I'd always been a computer nerd, but I'd never been really programming that hard or that way inclined. So I think, I was just definitely like, what even is this? Like, why is it exciting? And to be honest, like, I did not get into Linux back then. Nothing about Ubuntu really caught me. Like, nobody really talks to me about the programming and open source side of it, so I never really got into that.
The era you're talking about was like one of the very first versions that they ever came out with. So
first version was 04, right?
Yeah, it was 4.10, I think.
Yeah, but I still have a disk somewhere. I definitely haven't thrown it out. I've got a disk version of Ubuntu that I ordered off the internet to install it because it wasn't fast enough to get the ISO and burn it to something.
Well, back in the day, I used to just want them to send me a disc because they do it for free anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, I don't know if I paid for it or not. Yeah, that's true. It might have just been free.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when was it on your journey you decided, this Linux is pretty good and this is for me?
Yes, I have a weird history of education. I did a bachelor's degree in computer visualization and animation, which is a weird way of saying like special effects and stuff. And a lot of people, you guys might know, but like a lot of people in the Linux community don't realize that in animation and especially special effects, Linux is used in a huge amount.
Mm-hmm.
So at university, all of our computers were running Linux. That would have been Ubuntu 08, I guess. I think it was 08 because it was 09 when I joined, and it was probably legacy systems.
They're probably using the LTS or something.
Yeah, so that got me more into Linux, because then doing work where you're doing Python scripting in Maya and stuff, and then being able to use the command line to quickly run scripts and build up and customize your system.
Nice.
That got me into it more. Definitely.
So let's talk more about the Linux aspect to it. So what is your preferred desktop environment, and why is it Plasma?
I love the debates this show has about DEs, to be honest. Because to me, I am so uninvested in it. I mean, so let's be clear, my favorite is GNOME, and I only ever use GNOME. But the reason I only ever use GNOME is because
can we pause for a second and just cancel this interview?
No.
Okay, continue.
But the reason I only use GNOME is because, I mean, GNOME isn't a desktop environment to me. It's just a way of getting out of the way to let me use everything else. Like, GNOME is, I press the Windows key, you know.
Yeah.
I press the Windows key to see my windows, and I use, like, Windows key and left, right to move some windows. But apart from that, GNOME is just not a thing. Like, there's nothing that I use, right?
Interesting.
So, like, yeah, XFC, and a few of the other minimal ones I might use at some point, but GNOME just works. I've never had issues.
So I take it from that you are running the Ubuntu proper
these days.
And is that your favorite?
No, so I don't actually like Ubuntu that much these days. Sorry. I think actually it's because apt to me is just not an apt, and like deb packages and all this kind of mix isn't a fun way of installing software. I use Arch, and I do that because like the AUR is so good at just letting me install anything I want. And Pacman is an amazing package manager, so I use Arch.
Nice.
So that then begs the question: are you a real Arch user?
Not at all.
You installed it yourself, yeah.
I've bricked. Not completely brick, but you know, I've failed to install Arch a few times. No, I just use Antergos to get Arch installed, and it's got some nice skins. Like it skins GNOME well. You get nice icons, and fancy stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's just Arch afterwards. Like it's not Antergos isn't some mystical, magical, different thing. It's just a way to install Arch. So, and it works. Which is the main thing.
It is technically a separate distro, but that's not important. Just to clarify.
Yeah. You know, yeah. It has some of its own packages and stuff, but you can actually install Antergos and just rip out everything that's Antergos.
Yeah, you can install the base version too.
Yeah.
And it provides an access to Arch if you want to, with and it is 100% compatible. But as someone who's on the team of Antergos, I had to specify that it is not a complete Arch distro. So.
But I like the way it works, right? To have a variation of Arch that you can kind of just go back to Arch if you want to.
Yeah, it's a nice way to get back if you want.
Yeah.
You don't even just using the base install strips out a lot of stuff, so you don't have to. You can just basically be Arch right at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I had ran Arch. I had ran Antergos GNOME up until the point, I think, when they went and made Wayland default without telling anybody and completely messed up my machine.
I don't think they've done that yet, actually.
Well, they did it, and then they reverted it.
Oh,
so,
yeah, okay.
It was a little testing bed thing.
Yep. I mean, that happens with Wayland for every distro, right? Like, Fedora did it, and Fedora just broke a load of people's stuff. Ubuntu did it, and then they had to not do it for NVIDIA. Yes, which got really confusing because trying to help people with problems, you have to are you on NVIDIA? And they'll be like, yeah, and you're like, so you're not on Wayland? And then they wouldn't know how to check
or even know what that means.
Yeah, exactly. What is Wayland? Just nightmare, really.
So it sounds like this next question is going to be a bit of a non de plume, so to speak. But are you a distro hopper?
I used to be. I think while going from Ubuntu to finding a home, you know, I've tried every distro under the sun from a few years ago, not some of the newer ones, because there's a couple of Arch equivalents that have come out recently that I'd like to give a go. But no, these days I just install Arch basically. I've when working at Apparel, my work machine had 10 OSs installed.
Really?
Everything from SUSE Tumbleweed to the normal distro of SUSE, Arch, basic Arch. I finally got real Arch installed, Antergos, 3 different distros of Ubuntu. I had Solus because that's very nice as well. I'd use Solus if Arch wasn't as good as it is.
Now, was that all for testing purposes?
Yeah, definitely. It was just great. And Linux is so powerful in letting you do that. I could share up to a point home folders between them all, share basically everything, and just swap between them easily. And then, use whatever distro I wanted on whatever day I decided to use it. And it just so happened that was always Antergos by the end. But
And did they all tend to be the GNOME variation, or?
Yeah, well, no, because I think if you look at like the install base, GNOME is pretty popular, but it's not like super, whatever the right word is for that. It's not like 80-90% where you can kind of
Right. It's not dominant. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to have, like Ubuntu Unity that needed to be around because honestly, Ubuntu Unity caused more problems than any other DE that I'd ever used. So I needed that. And KDE behaves slightly differently. It's easy to cause like hangs when like maximizing a window in KDE because the order of like events you get back from the window manager is slightly different to everything else. So yeah, I had a mix of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think cinnamon on one of them. Yeah, mint cinnamon, I guess, would have been one of them.
Cool. So with your prior work at Feral and now that you're with Unity, we're going to be talking obviously a lot about gaming. But why is gaming an important topic in your opinion when it comes to Linux and adoption?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think for me, like I didn't get into programming or porting Linux games because I wanted to increase Linux adoption, but while I was doing that, it became evident that was clearly a way to go, right? I think if you think about like some of these surveys that have been done for the PC master race crowd sort of thing about like how many of them would use Linux if it had their games. And that percentage is extremely high for what you'd expect. Like it was over 50%, right? And yeah, the intent is debatable because obviously like you tick that box and say I'd use Linux, but then actually you wouldn't maybe.
Right.
But if we can convince some of those people to move to Linux, to more outspoken about games and about the OS they're using than anyone else really. So that might help. It's kind of hard to say.
Yeah. I've talked to a few people who they said that they would use it if they could just play the games, but because they can't, they don't bother.
Yeah.
So like this is definitely a big topic.
Yeah, and I'm a dirty dual booter. Like I had to be because I was working on porting Windows games to Linux. But
yeah,
even now,
just use that excuse. It's fine.
I don't even have an excuse.
Like for me, what it would take for me to like only use Linux would be for my games to be on Linux. That's the only reason I use Windows.
Yeah.
And sometimes for like random hardware just not working because for whatever reason, but so yeah, to me, people like me, I feel like games on Linux would mean you go more to Linux. So,
well, like you said, there's those numbers out there that would say that I would use Linux, like because I'm in that same boat. I would definitely. The only reason I have a Windows partition or Windows drive is to play certain games. So if those were on Linux, Windows would be gone. But you're right. Not everybody that says that would actually do that. So,
yeah.
I mean, probably most would just because there's probably like a barrier of I don't understand this because I haven't used it before, so they might be hesitant there.
Yeah.
But there's definitely people who would be more interested if they could just play certain games or hopefully most games.
I mean, if you think about like what most people do on computers these days, it's almost entirely in Firefox. Like my parents, there's no reason why they need to be on Windows. Well, my mom's now on Mac, but like, there's no reason why they're tied down to an OS apart from like a bit of the ecosystem about devices, maybe.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But for the most part, yeah, you're right. Like 80% of people who use Windows probably don't need to use Windows.
Yeah. And Linux kind of just works these days for a lot of things. Like on my laptop, it just doesn't because Linux is still terrible with NVIDIA laptops for some reason. Like I kind of blame NVIDIA for that, probably. Like
you could definitely blame NVIDIA.
Yeah,
for that.
definitely.
Yeah, like it's not. That's just kind of the way it is. But other than that, right? Like NVIDIA desktop is completely fine. Like I've never had an issue installing Linux on a desktop.
Yeah, I gave up on using NVIDIA for laptops a long time ago. Just basic onboard graphics. Just give up. But speaking of just working, you currently work for Unity. Mm-hmm. But before we get to that, let's talk about the work you did for Feral. And you helped port over 20 games to Linux. while at Feral. What are some of the hardships you encountered when porting games to Linux?
Yeah, so I'd say what are the easy bits?
Okay.
Because there aren't many of them. I think like if you think about like the reason Feral exists as a company, is because it's not easy to port the games that they're porting to Linux or Mac, right? There are games where it's easy, like Unity. It's not easy, but like it's there are games where a developer could do it themselves with fairly minimal knowledge of the Linux platform. But a lot of these games are, like a lot of the games we worked on were so heavily tied into Windows. Like the code had only ever been compiled with a Windows compiler. You know, like all the library usage and everything is tied into Windows. Some of them would like use window events to send information within the engine, and it's like this is not healthy for like cross-platform support at all. So yeah.
So how much rewriting did you have to do to for those games?
So I can't go into too much detail about what Feral actually does internally, unfortunately. But
significant portion, as
no, I mean like it's actually funny. Like we had a joke with my colleagues where like we'd look at a game and we'd think that the code was terrible, but then you actually look at how much code you'd looked at and how much just worked. And these games have like 1 million, 2 million, millions of lines of code, and you've only had to fix like a few thousand because the rest is just C++ and it kind of works.
Nice.
But it's the problem is that those 2,000 can be like a complete nightmare to try and figure out.
Just a few thousand. It's no big deal.
Just a few thousand.
I suppose one of the hardest, one of the most annoying challenges is like a case-sensitive file system. Like that shouldn't be a problem, maybe, but it actually like really is. That can be a complete nightmare.
Especially if they use camel case in their development or something like that. Yeah,
well, like I mean, the includes. Like when you're actually coding, you include a new file, right? And like that can be hard, but I mean, you can automate that eventually. You can automate fixing that. But things like if a game saves a file with an uppercase at the beginning, and to the game that means something, that the file is uppercase at the beginning of the word, right? And if it saved it lowercase, it actually means it's a different type of file or something to the game. On Windows, that's fine because even though the file is on the case-insensitive file system. When you query the name of the file, you still get the uppercase or lowercase, right? But if you're trying to simulate having a case-insensitive file system, you kind of want to like lowercase all the files or uppercase them all to kind of make stuff just work. But then when you query the name of that file, it's not what the game saved it as. So it's just like these sorts of tiny little things that you wouldn't expect to be a problem can just be a major hassle.
Right. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of other hardships. I'd say the fact. Sorry, Seb?
I was going to say. So, with all these hardships, what were some of your favourites that you helped port over? What at the end of the day did you go, yes, did it?
I'd say like getting graphics running. Like going from DirectX to like a fully functioning Vulkan game, right? And then seeing it work. I never did that much of the Vulkan porting. I mostly had skills in OpenGL, and then I was busy like managing, I guess, or just doing other stuff. But seeing that process, because it's kind of magic, like graphics programming is just magic anyway. It's just making a load of maths appear like real life. Like shaders are just, you put some numbers in, you get numbers out, and somehow it now looks like a person on screen. So to get the whole thing and change it into another format, and get a new graphics card to understand that's really cool. Yeah.
All right. So with your experience with Feral and porting all these games, we talked about some of the hardships. We talked about what you liked. What are the biggest hurdles facing Linux in getting more games to the platform? And why is it NVIDIA?
I don't think it's NVIDIA. I think we rag on about NVIDIA because
it's easy.
A source driver, and it's easy to laugh at that because it causes problems all over the place.
Yeah, it's easy to blame NVIDIA because they cause problems all the time.
Yeah, for like distros and stuff. For games, though, I mean, I was Feral for 5 years, and like, if you look at the state of the NVIDIA drivers 5 years ago compared to the state of the AMD drivers 5 years ago, like, there's a clear reason why AMD wasn't officially supported for some of the earlier Feral games, because like these AMD drivers would just straight up kill your system. Like, I'm not even joking. You'd run a game, and then 5 minutes into the game, your system would just die, and it might even black screen when you try to turn it on again. And it's just, this isn't okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like, Mesa obviously changed that, and these days Mesa is amazing.
Yeah, when you were using the proprietary AMD, like for a long time, AMD's drivers were just absolutely trash. And then
FGLRX is what it was called.
that one.
That was just utterly unusable for most like AAA gaming. Like AMD stuff's fine, but as soon as you give it like any complicated game, it just.
It was like a 10-year period where AMD was like, yeah, I'm not going to touch that. And now it's like, I want a Threadripper.
Yeah, well, this turnaround in 5 years of like, because you'd asked me 5 years ago about like what graphics card would you buy for an Linux machine, and I'd have to reluctantly say NVIDIA. I'd be like, it's closed source, fine, but still, you just might as well, because you're not going to have fun otherwise. But these days, it's straight up, and it's AMD every time. Like, there's no way I could recommend an NVIDIA card on Linux, because they're good and they work, but sometimes they don't, and AMD is, to me, just as good in that respect.
Yeah, and also the AMD, the fact that they're doing open source drivers, and they recommend the open source drivers, you just automatically have support just by and you having that hardware. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of that's.
I would like to see the AMD cards come down in price a little bit, like the Vega 64.
Nice.
That would be awesome. But
blame the Bitcoin miners. I mean,
yeah, we'll blame them because that's easy too.
It's pretty accurate too, though. So anyway, you worked for Apparel for 5 years. What caught your eye elsewhere?
I think I'd say 5 years is a reasonable time to work on one thing.
There's actually been like some business, I don't know what you call it, motivational speakers or anything, but there's some people who say that if you're working for someone for 5 years or more, and if you're not at the point of getting to like becoming like an executive or something, you might as well look around and see if there's something else. Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, like at Apparel, I was like into middle management, but it wasn't really, because it's like every tech company is like so flat. There's nobody's really anybody's. Well, my boss is my boss, but like I wasn't really nobody's boss, right?
Right.
But I guess that progression existed, right? But like, no, it was just more kind of, if you look at what Apparel's doing, they're very successful right now porting Linux games, and it becomes less of a question of, can I push this to be better, and do I have the power to do that, and everything else. And actually, like, they're doing pretty well. I'm happy with everyone working there, and I figured it was time to move on. Basically,
good reason.
Yeah, and this thing came up Unity. This thing at Unity came up, and luckily it's nearby-ish. I have to commute for an hour and 20 minutes on the train every day.
That's not nearby, dude.
Well, so I can work on the train on my laptop, and I always get a seat, because I'm going, like, if you think about commuting, usually going into a big city is a major hassle because there's tons of people trying to commute in. But I'm commuting out of London every morning, so going the other way, there's just always seats. The trains are basically empty, so it's a great experience.
Nice.
So yeah.
So let's talk about your current position with Unity. What is it, and what are your day-to-day responsibilities?
So it's kind of hard to define that. So actually, well, I've joined what's called the Sustained Engineering team, which is a very boring, confusing name. But in general, in the industry, sustained engineering is a term used for like people who improve the practices of the company from a technological standpoint to make sure that everything carries on smoothly. Mm-hmm. Which is a bit of a boring way of putting it. And actually at Unity, the sustained engineering team does not stick to that only. They do bug fixes. They're on call for any like big issues that happen and someone needs to look at them. And we're all generalist programmers. Like, I do a bit of graphics, I do everything else, so I'm useful in all of that. And we have the time to focus on what we want to focus on when there's not like a big issue on call, which is actually, I get the impression that's a lot of the time, because there's enough people in the team. so we can pick our own projects to see how they'd improve Unity and then push that forward. So it's kind of, yeah. So my day-to-day is, at the moment, just everything. I've been juggling loads of different stuff, trying to figure out what I'll be good at.
But there's no set list that you go in and this is what you have to do for today?
No, not really. It's more self-directed than that. And like I'll say, like you can check like the SDL mailing list. I've submitted a bug fix to SDL because of the thing I was looking into. So I'm doing Linux stuff. Which is, my job title isn't like Linux whatever something.
Right.
It's just a software engineer at Unity because like all tech companies, it's super flat.
Yeah, and most of the time they have like titles that are not really specific that much anyway. Yeah,
like it's really hard to even figure out titles in tech when you're a software engineer because like I can work on any number of bits of the code base, from like the build pipeline to the graphic stuff to the editor, like the GUI and stuff. Like, so to call me like a UI programmer or a whatever isn't a good idea really, because it defines me too much, I think.
Yeah.
So you must love filling in all those online forms. What's your job title? Pick from this list.
Yeah. Well, you just have to say software engineer, right? Like I've been doing that for years. You just say software engineer and then hope people understand. That's what you tell your parents, right? You do computers.
It's broad enough, like it's fine. So Unity is like one of the leading game development platforms, and it's supported on a ridiculous amount of systems, and you can port games from various different systems to others with Linux. Could you explain the process a developer has to go through to port their game to Linux with Unity?
Yeah, so I'll have to correct what you said last week on the podcast, Michael, where you said you just click a button and it's done.
Well, I mean, I was being a little bit exaggerating about, but it's not. Yeah. There is a button.
Oversimplifying a little bit.
So there is genuinely a button of switch platform, right? And then you switch that to Linux. And if you've done like everything right, and you've like, let's say you've only used features within the Unity engine provided with the editor by default, or plugins that Unity provide themselves, then everything should just work, and you should just press a button and the whole game should work on Linux, right? That's the aim. And that applies to like all other platforms that Unity does, basically. It's like you just press a button and it should just, well, not all platforms because some are different, whatever. The main ones.
Right.
Yeah, my statement was about the ideal situation.
Yeah, so the ideal situation is, you just press that button. I think it's a common misconception that it can be that easy, because no matter what you do, you hit the same problems that everyone else did with every other like system when they try and move to another platform. Like you might have used like an animation plugin that someone developed without ever touching Linux, and that animation plugin, uses some library that just doesn't exist on Linux, or is proprietary, and like I think 3ds Max or something doesn't have a Linux version, so you can't use some file types on Linux because there's just no way you can decode them legally, at least I would think.
Right.
So there's stuff like that. You might have to convert your models to whatever I've forgotten the normal model term, the like generic one. It's like .odt or something like that. But that's an open office document. Yeah, whatever.
It's all good.
Yeah. So from what you've seen so far, what is it about Unity that makes it more developer friendly in that regards for porting stuff over?
Oh, well, I mean, like a lot of everything is handled for you. Like the file system stuff I was talking about, like Unity kind of just handles that because it's aware of how the file system works and everything. Graphics, like Unity's graphics pipelines are valid on all the APIs that they support effectively. There's some caveats, but like in general, your game can run on OpenGL, Vulkan, and DirectX, and Metal, and most of what you've done should work. Like the shaders don't need to be translated. It's the same shading language on both platforms. The C# code just uses mono, and the mono runtime is the same, so you shouldn't get too many differences. Definitely not the same amount that you get between Microsoft's C++ compiler and GCC, which is like two different worlds in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a ton there that makes it way easier for people to port.
Nice.
Now, are there any distros that are recommended by Unity?
Ooh, yeah, so I think officially, if you look on the if you look on like the Unity website somewhere, I think it says that Ubuntu is the like one they targeted. Because originally it was like targeting Ubuntu 12.04, I think, and now it's 14.04, 16.04. So it's basically what Feral had, which was we were just like, yeah, we're targeting Ubuntu because you kind of have to, but it should work everywhere else. And it's the same with Ubuntu. In fact, same with Unity. In fact, Unity is kind of so self-contained that it really should work everywhere. Because it doesn't rely on like the Steam runtime, which some games have to. Unity ships virtually all of the dependencies with the game. So the game should just work everywhere as long as you've got a good graphics driver.
Wow.
So it's not related to the way that the Steam started with Ubuntu by default with like the 12.04 version. So that really doesn't have any effect to Unity. It's kind of like it's kind of going along with the flow, sort of.
No, I mean that's definitely what it looks like. It's hard though on Linux to like ensure support for a lot of platforms. I think a lot of people get annoyed when it's like this game only supports Ubuntu, and it's like, well, what's being said there is actually the developers support department only has the expertise to help you out on Ubuntu, because a lot of other stuff they just can't know. They'll just be Googling Stack Overflow like you will.
Like it could work. They just don't have the support technically, because there's been times people would go to the Steam forum or something and just like rage about not supporting their particular distro, having never tried it to see if it even worked.
Yeah, or like they have tried it and they've got the error, but they haven't really thought about looking up why that happened. And sometimes the errors are just the Steam runtime. Like if you look on, I mean, I think you've had Ike Doherty on here, right?
Yes, a couple times, yeah.
Yeah, so Ike's done a load of work with his LSI Linux Steam integration, I think is what it's called, which is like a tool set that ensures that it fixes up all the nuances of the Steam runtime and the particular game so that it works on your distro. And that's all because the Steam runtime is just a massive hack and it just happens to work. So sometimes it needs to be fixed up, and that's what happens.
Well, Ike's done a lot of work to help that out. Unity 2018.2 just came out on the 10th, I believe. That's a new version. One question I do have before we get into the features of it, how often do you see a Unity release? So
there's 4 a year, basically, is what. So there's a new release model called the LTS model. I mean, I'm saying called, you know what the LTS model is because you know Ubuntu and all the other distros. But I think a lot of people didn't understand what that meant. But for Unity, it's the same as Ubuntu, except there's 4 releases instead of 2. So there'll be 2018.1, 2018.2, 2018.3, and then 2018.3 will transition into 2018.4 at the end of the year to become the LTS version for the next 2 years. So at the moment you've got 2017.4, which is the current LTS, and that's supported for 2 years.
So is there an LTS every year?
That's what it looks like, yeah. I think, yeah. The interesting thing is that there's a crossover for 1 year where you've got a year to transition between one LTS to the next, which wasn't really that period before they did the LTS structure. You just kind of had to upgrade for every single version and try and hope that everything worked. But this path should be a lot better for that. It should mean that more game developers can, use Unity and know that for 3 years they'll kind of be safe in moving up a version and they'll get the support they need.
Nice. I think it's good that they're having an LTS every year, because game developers should more than likely update as soon as possible. But to also have that like safety net sort of thing is nice.
Yeah, but they won't, right?
Yeah,
nobody
they
ever
totally.
does.
I don't expect them to, but I would want them to.
Yeah, exactly. but it's hard because especially if you've released a game and it's out there and it's making you money, and then to update the entire engine and risk breaking it and risk stopping your income for a bit is scary. So I think the LTS is meant to help with that, because it's like it should be a guaranteed update path, right? You can go from one LTS to the next safely.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, with this 2018.2 release, a lot of it is way over my head. So is there a feature or a favorite feature of yours in this release that is like, this is an awesome new feature?
Yeah, well, so the one that I know about that I don't remember if it's like completely new in 2018 too, but it's had a lot of improvements, is the ECS, the Entity Component System, which just, to anyone who's not a programmer, is kind of sheer magic, and it's kind of hard to explain what it does.
So you can explain it for us.
Even some programmers.
So if you want me to try, I can. Basically, I think a lot of the time before, people were writing unoptimized code without realizing that it was unoptimized. And try as hard as Unity did, Unity couldn't like post-optimize your code, basically. The ECS is like a more confined way of writing processes that mean that they're like automatically multi-threadable, jobifiable, is that a word? Whatever.
Right.
That works.
It is now.
That sort of thing. And all the data in these jobs effectively is organized in a way that it is very efficient for the CPU to read from it. So it's contiguous in order, in memory, because when you're writing a game, it's really slow if your update loop is constantly jumping around 8 gigs of RAM all the time. Whereas if all the stuff it needs to access is just contiguous in memory, then it's a lot faster. So the ECS helps with making that happen by default. So any old programmer who doesn't really understand how to optimize their code fully can write code that is automatically optimized.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it should make it a lot easier for people to write fast code. And that's exciting for me because it's hard for me to explain to someone how to write fast code anyway.
Right. So it's a big organizer is what it is.
Yeah, sort of. It's confusing to write for because it's a new paradigm. Like if you're used to writing code a different way, then it can be confusing. But I think for newcomers, actually, everything's new anyway, so it's just another way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I like the description magic. That works.
Yeah, magic.
Yeah. I mean, it's all just magic. Well, programming's magic anyway.
Mm-hmm. So one of the features discussed with the release notes is Vulkan and Linux improvements. So what were some of those improvements made for Linux?
So I wish I knew, like off the top of my head, a full list.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a changelog online. If you just search for like what's new in 2018.2 and like Control F for Vulkan, you'll see stuff like there's new format support. I think they added support for using joint shaders and pipelines or something like that. That's not a thing, but something like that.
Right.
So Vulkan support should be getting faster and better within Unity, basically, and that's kind of what happened in 2018 too. The other one is that you can now use Vulkan in the editor.
All right.
So Unity's got this thing where you have the editor and you can play the game in the editor while you're making it, which is really great. And you can edit code while it's running, which is fun. But that was only OpenGL on Linux before. And now
as you're actually losing a battle, you can then recode it to say, no, I'm going to win this one.
Yeah, I mean, it might not work because of many reasons, but you can try. Like changing the code underneath a program, as much as you try and make it work, can just go wrong. But so it's got Vulkan support in the editor, which is really cool because that means that if there's any, like if your graphics are wrong in Vulkan, for whatever reason, you can now see it in the editor straight away, without having to build your game and then running it. It makes it easy to debug as well because all the editor tools are there. So that's experimental, but that's cool, and that's on Linux. Yeah. So
staying on the Vulkan subject, what's your view on Vulkan and its viability for cross-platforming games? Is it going to be that important? Is it that important already?
Yeah, I think it's important already. I think it's a tough one because if we said like, oh, there's this new API and it's usable in all the same situations as the old one, and it's just better, and it works great on Windows and Linux, then you'd have this situation where like, yes, no matter what, 100%, it's just better and it's going to help everything. But Vulkan is a slightly lower level API. It's a bit hard to use. So it's not like an immediate and like an immediate win, because a lot of like indie developers just wouldn't be able to use it. But these days, I think it's a massive win because you can, like with Unity, let's say, you can do the Unity game in Vulkan on Windows and Linux, and then your cross-platform graphics engine, well, you know, the rendering itself is effectively the same on both platforms, and that saves a metric ton of time, like genuine huge hours and hours of time. So that's massive. And if you're a developer who's good enough to program graphics engines, then using Vulkan is like kind of an automatic. Like, if someone came to me and was like, "I'm writing my own engine in OpenGL right now," I'd pause for 5 seconds to wonder why they're using OpenGL in 2018. Like, it's just not. It's clearly not the right choice anymore.
And also, the developers want to have that low-level access to the hardware anyways, like as low as possible. So Vulkan kind of provides that.
Yeah, and it's a massive boon to companies like Feral or engine writers, because they have so much more control over what they're giving the graphics card.
Do you think it'll ultimately make porting to Linux easier?
I think. I mean, I'd say it already has. Like, I can assume that porting like Doom to Linux would be an incredibly easy process. Knowing id, they probably write very good, nice, solid code, so the like coding complications are probably not there, and it already runs Vulkan. So, well, we've seen it running Vulkan on Linux, right? Because it can run through Wine. So clearly the game already works graphically. So yes, it should. I mean, obviously Doom hasn't come to Linux, right? But that game is a great example of why it would be easier for a Vulkan game to come to Linux if someone actually did it, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So staying on the Vulkan line again, are there any additional hurdles, or are there any hurdles that you think it needs to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually more feature complete than a lot of people think. Like, there's some things that if you're going from DirectX 12 to Vulkan, there's some things that can get confusing. There's like I think it's in DirectX 12 you can do this like weird reference counting thing where I'm just going to get into programming terms here, but your like semaphore on the GPU has a number and it can be increased on the GPU. You can't do that with Vulkan at the moment, so it would be very hard to like transport a bit of code from one to the other right now. But I would assume those features are coming. The programmers are insanely receptive to any sort of feedback.
But that's I take it, an isolated thing.
Yeah. And also, like, if you're writing the engine yourself, you can probably just do something slightly differently. Like, I've not seen anyone abuse that feature so much that it's like sped up their game 2 times on DirectX 12.
Right.
And I've not seen many DirectX 12 games. Have you guys heard of any DirectX 12 games?
No, not really.
No.
I've seen a lot of games that are where DirectX 11 that are switching to Vulkan by default anyway.
Yeah, well, there's definitely benefits there. I think if you just search on Wikipedia, I'm not going to do it now, but if you search on Wikipedia for DirectX 12 games and then for Vulkan games, the Vulkan games page is bigger than the DirectX 12 game.
And a significant chunk of the DirectX 12 games are the ones that have exclusive contracts with Microsoft.
Yes, or and then there are games that would never come to any other platform anyway. Like, what was it, like Ori and the Blind Forest is a game that was like made by Microsoft Studio. They were asked like if they'd bring it to Linux. The answer was, well, Microsoft would have to let us.
Yeah,
right.
Would Microsoft do that? Probably not. So,
but they heart Linux. Microsoft hearts Linux.
They heart Linux, right?
Well, they do, but they also kind of want to push their gaming platform. And
they heart it with an asterisk right next to the heart.
Come on, they just gave us PowerShell. Come on.
Right. We totally needed that.
When I saw that news, I just couldn't. I just like, why would I want that?
Right. I was actually talking about that for you yesterday, and someone in the chat was saying that as a sysadmin, they like it being available because they can now use Linux to administer Windows systems. I was like, okay, finally we have one reason why that's a good idea.
Well, it's like the WSL, the Windows subsystem for Linux.
Yeah.
Like, that gives you Bash effectively and anything else you want on Windows, and that's incredibly cool because to me it just makes Windows a better experience in general. because I can now do all the things I did on Linux. Like make GIFs incredibly easy with ImageMagick, right? Like, which is clearly what ImageMagick.
That's why you do it. Yep.
Yeah, but I can now do that on Windows incredibly simply. I just type in bash and I'm done. So that to me is amazing. But yeah, I don't know why the other way around. I mean, yeah, maybe managing Windows systems, but still.
I mean, I think it's beneficial. It kind of does show that they have somewhat changed, that they're open sourcing things like PowerShell and they're putting it into the snaps and stuff like that. So it's good, and I hope they continue. And I still will not care about what they're doing until they actually like prove something that's beneficial. Like, for example, if they put MS Office or something like that, that it proves that does not benefit them in any way whatsoever to do it. And then they do it anyway. Like that'd be good, because this way it kind of potentially has improvements to people to use Windows servers for some reason.
Yeah, there were probably people telling Microsoft that they were going to stop using Windows for X number of servers because they needed to manage it from Linux and it just wasn't working, and that's what spurred this to happen, right? So like, yeah, it's tough to see. It's tough to see whether it was just all fun and let's help out Linux, or really it was just a massive business decision, which it usually is.
I'm cautiously optimistic. I hope they do continue to improve. But let's go back to sort of still on Windows aspect, but let's go to Unity. Are there any features that are in the Windows version of Unity that aren't in the Linux version yet?
So I can't give you a firm answer on this. But as far as I know, nothing significant.
That's good. There's a lot of applications that do that. So
yeah, I mean, I'm sure like if I could get in touch with someone who actually definitely knows at Unity what like one small tiny thing just doesn't work for whatever reason. I think like one example would be like what I was talking about before. I think stuff like support for third-party applications that don't have Linux support. Like I think 3ds Max is that one. So like there's no 3ds Max importer for Linux.
And DAS or something like that too.
Yeah. But in the engine itself, I don't know of anything. So yeah, I think it's pretty fair. Maybe the like new rendering pipelines might have slightly worse experimental support than Linux currently on Linux, but I don't think there's anything major. It's pretty good.
All right. Well, Unity supports all kinds of things: 2D, 3D, AR, and VR. Now, VR was this big thing in the news. All you've seen was news articles about VR everywhere, and I don't think that VR has lived up to the hopes that everybody had for it. So you have not yet, anyway. So do you have any thoughts on what needs to happen for things like Oculus and Vive to find their place in everyday households?
Have you guys seen Magic Leap stuff? The like leaks and things of those goggles?
No.
No.
I've seen I forgot what it's called, but maybe it's something like that where it's just detecting, like there's the one that's detecting your like the retina to your eye. Is that the one you're talking about?
I think it does. It definitely does some look stuff, so it can tell where you're looking.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think the problem is there's no like official stuff. But either way, Magic Leap seems to be like a new kind of Oculus startup, effectively, where like someone decided to make a VR thing. I don't know if they're backed by anyone big, but they're making effectively something that's a bit more the size of like swimming goggles, more like maybe not swimming goggles, but like flying goggles. You know, the old school biplane stuff. And they're AR as well, because there's a big lens there, so you can see through them, as well as doing straight up normal VR. They just black out the lens and then show you what you want to see.
Right.
So to me, stuff like that, which is only going to be a few years off, is going to massively help with VR uptake. Because at the moment, like I have a Vive.
Oh yeah.
Like I've got it here underneath my desk. But like setting it up, while it's way easier than setting up anything in VR was 5 years ago, it's still a lot of effort. and like having a PC that can run it is tough. Even getting your PC configured right so it does run it. Also, like you need to use the Vive with enough space, but most of the time that space isn't next to your computer.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's a barrier
and you're
as well.
tethered to it for sure.
Yeah, so like I used to, and I have a laptop that can run it, but I used to from here run an extended USB and HDMI. I had to use powered USB and powered HDMI cables because like 15 meters that way, or maybe 10 meters that way into my other room where there's space.
Right.
And no normal consumer should have to put up with that. So I think getting all those barriers down, maybe getting the price down a bit, in 3 or 4 years, all computers will be able to run this stuff because like even the baseline NVIDIA cards these days can do VR. Or not like a 1040, I think a 1040s, but 1050 can. So an 1140 should be able to do VR, and then you're in a space where, you know, everyone can effectively do VR with any computer they buy.
The only experience I have with the VR is the Google Cardboard thing.
Was that you've not actually bought a Vive?
No, those are it's cool.
But you've not put one on.
I've put it on and I've used it, and it's still it's basically worthless other than videos. So on the phone, so like there's a few game things, but it's not.
It's not.
So what's your opinion on the Vive?
I think it's great. For everything it's trying to do, it does it all very well. It needs a better screen resolution because some games you just can't read text because it's too blurry. It needs to be smaller because this wasn't an issue. I mean, Zeb would know, like this wasn't an issue until a couple of months ago, but now it is too hot in the UK to use my Vive. Like it's just unpleasant. Like I'll put it on and 20 minutes later I'll have been sweating so much that I have to like wipe it down basically. Like it's not a nice experience.
Right.
So it has problems, but other than that, it's great. I love it. I think Beat Saber isn't on Linux, so I did dual boot to play it. But Beat Saber is just one of the best gaming experiences I've had in years.
So do you think that VR is like the hype around it has been around for a long time, but do you think that the hype, while not fair to it currently, do you think the hype in the future would be like valid?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you think of it another way, like I think VR at this stage has proven that it is or will be capable of having the like seamless experience that we kind of wanted from it with the next generation hardware that we get in a few years. And it's proven that some games are just incredible in VR. Like Elite Dangerous, again, on Linux, but, you know. Elite Dangerous is fantastic in VR. Even like Dota, watching a live professional Dota game while just sitting cross-legged on the floor and like all these little heroes, like little 20 centimeter high heroes running around and fighting next to you, right around you with the commentators and everything. That is an incredible experience. Like that
sounds awesome.
That does sound pretty awesome.
Like imagine like if you did that for sports, right? If you were a soccer fan for the Americans.
Who's a soccer fan? I mean,
soccer was invented. The term soccer is invented by English. So.
I know, it's terrible, isn't it? Even if you're an American football fan, right? Like if you could get in a VR headset in your living room and it would feel like you're there, but also you could be even closer because when you go to a game, you're still like 20 meters away.
Yeah.
But to be able to feel like you're on the pitch, like think about like the World Cup penalty shootout, to be able to like stand next to the person taking the shot, like that experience would be amazing.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
So like, and this stuff is clearly possible in the next 5 years. So
nice. I know the 3D stuff is kind of like I saw a football game in 3D and it was really cool, also disconcerting a little bit because it was kind of like novelty only benefit, but it was still kind of cool. Whereas VR, the possibilities of VR are like extreme. So while I did think that the Google Cardboard experience was not very good, it still showed you even with the rudimentary stuff that it was it has a ton of potential.
Yeah, I think the Google Cardboard is a bit like, I don't know if they're called like lenticular somethings. There's like one of those, there's pieces like plastic that when you turn them, they go 3D.
Mm.
Yeah. The Google Cardboard isn't much from that, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It's that plus
that on your head,
in the
right?
phone. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the phone's
the
doing
Vive,
some of the stuff.
Yeah. But the Vive, like, with the controllers, like Beat Saber especially, because you're basically just holding lightsabers and cutting things to music, which is
Wow.
really fun.
That's okay. So you're I've never heard of Beat Saber. So you're saying
Oh,
it's
you're gonna
kind
look
of
it up.
like it's like Rock Band meets lightsabers.
Yes, literally that.
That's awesome.
In VR.
Yeah, well, I keep telling it to people who haven't tried it yet, and I keep trying to get people to come over and try it, because like there's things where like you'll do this like weird movement, like now I'm dancing, so you make a gif out of that, but like you'll do these like figure of 8 movements, right, that just feel so good when you get them right. And yeah, and it's an amazing exercise as well. In this heat, it's horrific, but like
I would come over, but you guys don't have air conditioning. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only limit right there.
Right. All right, Mark, do you have any personal projects that you're working on?
Not massively right now. I'm always a bit of a I'll start designing a game and then programming it and then give up after about 2 hours. I remember like 2 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I was making a game engine with a friend of mine. And we got to the point where you could play like Pong with a banana. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm done. Like, you can clearly make a game, so it's done. And I just left it. Never touched that code again. I think I'm terrible with that sort of stuff. If you know game mode,
Yep.
the Apparel tool, like that was actually one of the only side projects I've ever done, where I thought like, oh, I should actually finish this. And then that was like, at work I asked the question like, can I finish this using work time? Yeah.
Mhm.
So we're not going to see a new game coming out from Marc Di Luzio.
Not anytime soon, but I have some what I think are very cool ideas that probably as soon as you put them in a game are terrible.
Banana Pong? Yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah, Banana Pong was amazing. The banana spun as well, which is,
To be fair, there
there
are
are quite a
lots
lot of
games.
programming.
There's a lot of games that have that sound ridiculous and that turned out to be awesome. So even if you do put it in the game, it could be like a soccer with a car. That does sound ridiculous.
Well, like, oh, do I have it on me? So, like, there's this like for me, I'm more of a low-level programmer. I always have been. So, like, actually getting to the point where I'm making like a full-size game, it is a bit daunting. I did like computer animation, so I can actually 3D model and I can draw like a life draw and stuff like that. But even actually getting to the point of making a game is just a massive, big step up. But I do have this little thing. I don't know if you can see this like little Arduino, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I had a load of fun with this, just like his Pong on an Arduino screen.
Ryan would love that.
These are so cool, and like I bricked it like 5 times because you can overwrite the ROM memory from the RAM because for some reason the ROM is after the RAM. But like it's great fun. And that's the type of that I play around with in my own spare time. I think even being at Unity doesn't make me want to like actually make a game with Unity that much more. I think I'd rather like this. This is the nerdiest you're gonna hear on this. Excuse my French, but like this thing doesn't really support any sort of like data that you can load and stuff like that. It's pretty limited. But I made a full wrapper where you could write multiple games within the same game. So like this has, I just showed you Pong.
Turn into Snake.
Yeah, basically. Well, I've got asteroids.
Nice.
Whatever. Point is that's the sort of low level stuff, and this is like almost assembly language programming. There we go. There's some asteroids.
Nice.
That's nice.
Nice. So just moving on a little bit, do you have any recommendations for people who are wanting to get into game development, and why is that Unity?
I think it depends though, right? Like if you want to get into game development and you've never been a big programmer, then Unity is an amazing tool for that. It kind of always has been, but these days, especially with like the ECS we were talking about, this stuff like massively helps people who don't quite know how a computer works to like really make a game and make it work. But if you wanted to get into, I think, like making games and programming specifically, I think you kind of have to start from first principles. I started by learning Python at the same time as learning basic computer science. And there's loads of courses online that you can do for free now that teach you both of those. But to learn scripting at the same time as learning like NAND gates and how an actual CPU works, and that shouldn't take more than like an hour of your time for a month, or an hour of your time a day for a month or something like that, and you can spread that over a year. To get to a point where now you kind of understand why programming works, and now you can just have fun.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be my recommendation. Though I learned to program at university, so I kind of cheated. It's kind of hard for me to give advice to people who want to teach themselves.
Mm-hmm. All right. So on a similar vein, you've just gone out to PC World and you've bought yourself your brand new computer. You've installed Unity, and obviously your favorite Linux desktop. What are the must-have programs and tools that you need to then function?
So I have my .files repo thing that I pass around whenever I install an OS. Actually, on Windows, have you guys heard of Ninite on Windows?
Yeah.
It's an amazing tool.
Yeah.
I've got an Ninite installer that I don't go to the website anymore. I just have that installer and I double click it and I've got everything I want. But on Linux, like I just get like Tmux, Vim. I use Fish Shell, or Oh My Fish. I can't remember which one it's called. Like WeChat, ImageMagick. I already said you got to make GIFs. It's important stuff.
Got to make GIFs. I agree.
But these are all like command line tools. That's really only the most stuff I install. Like I'm just gonna shout out to like FZF is like a really cool fuzzy finder that's amazing on the command line. Shell check to like make sure your bash scripts make sense and don't rm-rf root, which you definitely don't want to happen. Yeah, I just install a load of that stuff. Programs wise, I don't. I used to use like big IDEs for development, and now I just use Vim. VLC is a great video player, but then I now use MPlayer from the command line mostly. Right. I just apt install Pacman-SYU or just SY, a load of
Capital SYU.
Capital S, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Well, capital S is the install. SYU is the upgrade.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, so there's a ton of little tools that I install basically, and then as I say, like I like my out of the box experience. I have GNOME without any extensions, and then I just I theme the terminal a little bit, and then I'm done, and I'm happy. So.
You've obviously worked with some amazing developers in the gaming world. And this is always a difficult question to people to answer because they think, oh, God, I better not miss out Phil or John or Chris or Pete. Who are the sort of like unsung heroes that you think deserve a bigger shout out in Linux and gaming programming? Yeah, I mean, I have to say it's a bit like biased, but every one of the Linux developers at Feral, even the ones who like, and I know who they are, like, moved more onto the Mac side for whatever reason. Right. They're like, Feral's not a company that like publishes all the people like front and center, and there's good sides to that, but those guys are kind of my unsung heroes. Like I've met a few people from like the Linux gaming community who kind of assumed because either like I was the only person who got mentioned publicly, or like Alex Smith's the other name that gets mentioned because he commits to Mesa a lot. Kind of assume that it was just me or just him or just both of us. But actually, no, there's a big team. And they're great people. I'd shout out to them.
So there is some work that has taken place getting Wine in a Snap, as well as some other games like Trackmania Nations and Xonotic. And as I was playing all those in a Snap, do you think this is a viable form of game porting to Linux?
No, it's such a tough one. I'd have to defer. Like I'd almost defer that question to like Ethan Lee, Flitbitijibo. I can't remember how to say his name. But the guy who does FNA, so he like loads of XBLA games that are now on Linux. So his fault. His
It's all his fault.
his frankly amazing work. But he went through a lot of hell trying to get things like a snap, especially like working in SteamOS.
Mm-hmm.
And I also have tried using like getting graphics drivers stuff accessible within flatpaks properly. And that can be a nightmare. And like iKey from Solace has done a really good job of putting like Steam in a snap in a flatpak. But even then, that causes issues. You can see the logs like
work on app images though, because I've seen app images. They have a much more connected into the core, so it's more possible for them to maybe be a solution.
Yeah, I can't admit I've spent much time using them, but no, I've heard the same thing. I think I wouldn't be surprised if like the Steam runtime eventually sort of becomes one of these once they're more stable, because at a certain point you'll need to app image snap or flatpak the Steam runtime, because it's going to become incompatible with future operating systems eventually. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's used more, but honestly, it's hard to say because they all have their own kind of problems. I know that like some games just outright crash if you put them in a flatpak, and the reasons that that's happening aren't the simplest reasons to solve. So yeah, it's tough. I can't give you a great answer on that one, unfortunately.
All right, so you're a gamer.
Mm-hmm.
Give us your 5 top Linux games, and why are they all Rocket League?
But they are all Rocket League.
I knew it.
No, I can give you some legit ones. So it'd be Rocket League definitely first. I mean, Michael and Rocco know how much I play Rocket League. But no, other ones. Kerbal Space Program, that's Linux, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's an amazing game. I'm pretty sure maybe with Unity as well. So that's a bit of a plug.
Nice. I think, little plug.
Yeah. I'm going to plug Feral, Rise of the Tomb Raider. For me, that was great actually. The kind of, because I always liked like Tomb Raider games ish, off and on, depending on which game, because some of them were a bit terrible.
Yeah. Right. The franchise had a little bit of a dip right before the recent ones.
Rise of the Tomb Raider was awesome though.
Yeah, exactly. For Rise, and then being able to port that actually was just amazing, because it's actually like to be able to port a game that I really like. I played it on Xbox One. Sorry, whatever. You know, I can't.
I've got one.
Gamer.
Yeah.
But
consoles get an exception. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, also like I played it before I like even. Did I know? I don't know if I knew we were porting it or not, but I'm pretty sure when I played it, I didn't even know if it was coming to Linux or not. So yeah. That one, Lethal League, I just found out was on Linux as well. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No.
But that's a great little, like, you can play 4v4, but it's mostly like a 2v2, like, squash game. It's not hard to describe. Like, everyone just hits a ball around, and then if the ball gets faster and faster, and you have to hit the ball to the music, it's crazy. Great game.
Is it pixelated? Would Ryan like it?
It's pixel art, yeah.
Okay.
I might like it, yeah.
All right, so
yeah.
let's forget that kind of pixelated games.
What?
Let's get back to Rocket League.
Yeah.
What is your current rank in Rocket League?
So I didn't just get it. I've had it off and on for a while. I'm champion rank in 2v2.
Nice.
So yeah, and I finally like a week ago got the champion reward. So I finally actually won 10 games as champion, which
so if you and Michael were to go to head, so would you stomp him?
1v1.
I don't think so. I hear Michael's like, well, we have played together. I think Michael's Diamond 3 or something. Well, he has been champ, so.
I haven't been champ technically because Psyonix hates me, but I have been champ 3. I mean, Diamond 3, Div 4 about 12 times. So
yeah, that was what it was like for me for a couple of months. It was very depressing.
Yeah, it's like you get so close and then you just tilt fest and you just crash.
Yeah. No, I think it'll be pretty close. I'm only barely champion. I'm really not that good.
Well, I mean, I actually, the thing is, a lot of people because the different playlists you play that game, you depending on your skill level in one playlist could be completely different in another playlist. So so when people ask me if they would beat me in like 1v1, it's like it's different if you play 3v3 and 1v1. They're super different. So I'm Diamond 2 in 1v1.
Diamond 2 is good in 1v1.
Yeah,
I think I'm Diamond 1, so yeah.
So it might be closer, even though he's a champ. Might be closer.
We'll have to play that out sometime and see what happens.
Yeah, also the real issue is the server lag.
Yeah, I feel a live stream coming on here.
Yeah, the server issue would be a problem.
The night
we could do one on each server.
Yeah. Best of 3 on UK and in US East.
Yeah, because I have to deal with like 120 ping. So.
Speaking of Linux games, do you have Ballistic Overkill?
Yeah, I do. I played it as well.
Yes.
I've seen you've been playing a lot, but I haven't actually been like online around the same time.
We have to.
I will.
We have to play it.
I will join.
They play at numpty o'clock in the morning. We just can't do that.
Nice.
Time zones are ridiculous.
Like BigDaddyLinux Live, right? It's like 6 in the morning or something for us. Like it's just
it's I think it's like earlier. It's like 3.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the worst time. Like if it was 6, I could get up early, but 3 is
3:30. There's no point in going to bed. Yeah.
So let's get back to the game development. So when working on with game developers, what kind of misconceptions do you hear or see when they're mentioning publishing for Linux?
Oh, so it's tough. So like I think there's a lot of misconceptions about Linux that carry over. You know, like a lot of people have had like a bad experience and they haven't had the help they needed, or like well, they didn't have the time to put in the effort to like learn how to fix whatever the experience was.
Right. Or like Ryan, they were told to RTFM.
Yeah, basically that, right? Like that is a problem.
Has there ever been a time where someone said they used it and they had a bad experience, and it turns out they were given advice to use something they were just not ready for?
Yeah. I've heard things like that. I think like there's a lot of people give different advice because they give advice based on what the best experience they've had. Which is why I'm not giving direct advice right now, because I feel like the best advice I have is just the best experience I've had, and I'm a technical developer person. So like, if I get a black screen, I go Control Alt F1, I look at the logs, I debug it, but then nobody else is going to do that, right?
Right.
I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, like even Rocco's not going to do it, and he hosts a Linux podcast. So.
That's
no,
fair.
I think a lot of it is that like that the experience, it would be very hard to like debug it and get it working and stuff. And I think actually, I'm going to plug Unity again. Unity helps with this because a lot of the same tools are cross-platform. Like the two like big C# debuggers that people use these days, as far as I know, like a JetBrains Rider and Visual Studio Code, and both of those are now Linux compatible. Mm-hmm. Well, I think JetBrains Rider always has been, but Visual Studio Code came to Linux, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like, for someone working on Windows and debugging Unity with those tools, it's the same tools. So, like, the only difference is that they're on GNOME instead of Windows, whatever you call Windows desktop manager, Explorer.exe, whatever they call that. And I think those are the sorts of misconceptions. It's just how people think it's hard to develop on Linux, and they've heard horror stories, because some devs have like posted Twitter rants about because they had an NVIDIA laptop. Let's say.
Yep.
And my advice would be don't use an NVIDIA laptop
or it was 10 years ago and they used AMD or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And the people who have an amazing experience usually don't jump to Twitter to start ranting about how it's amazing. So.
Yeah. We don't. I mean, and even if I did rant, like, you know, tell everyone a great story about how Linux was amazing, like, people are going to look at me and like, really, you're just incredibly biased. Like, why? Your opinion is not valid in that context. So,
So Unity is doing some great work in bringing Linux into more mainstream side of things, and I know that they're a successful company, but how can the average person help or get involved?
So did you know about wrote an article for Gaming on Linux like a month ago or so, kind of about this. Was that question like, is that like a poke to like tell me about this thing?
Tell us about that thing.
Could be.
Yeah,
Could be.
So I did an article. I wrote an article for Gaming on Linux. What was it called? Oh, I have it. I called it "How to Be a Great Advocate for a Niche Gaming Platform," which is a stupid name for a title, but all titles are dumb anyway. So,
For the most part.
I think, I think if you're not like technically minded and you're not going to get involved in actually porting games, some of the best things you can do are on that article, and they're things like just making sure that when you buy stuff, the money's going in the right place. Like if you're on Linux right now and you're using grey market like key resellers to buy your games, then you are not helping anyone. Like you even if you're on Windows doing that, you shouldn't be doing it anyway. But really on Linux, like that hurts a lot.
Yeah, because all those keys were purchased as Windows users.
Yeah, and it's just not helpful. They're Windows users, but even the developers don't get like the money most of the time. So that's one. I think I don't actually say it like this in the article, but there's always the rule of like don't be a dick. I think that would help if everyone just wasn't on online communities, because a lot of people get turned off based on some. I'm not going to name communities, but there are some communities out there that are very hostile towards any criticism of Linux. And
there are some communities that are hostile just for fun.
Yeah.
Exactly. Less of that would be great, I think.
Less of that would be awesome, let me tell you. I mean, we've come a long way. I mean, the Linux community, on a whole, has come a long way as far as that's concerned, because when I got into Linux, it was that way a lot of places. And it's opened up and become more friendly, but yeah, there's still definitely things we can do.
Yeah, I think the stuff, and the real problem is, like, I know of two cases, like, not going to name names here, but I know of two cases where a game could have come to Linux and it didn't because of the developer's bad experience with the community, right? Because Linux isn't, it has to be said that Linux, making a game for Linux is not like a massive commercial benefit,
right?
The incentive is not value wise, so they wanted what's the incentive. If the experience with the community was one of the incentives, that would be much better.
Yeah, and it should be, and in some cases it's like Ballistic Overkill. I haven't talked to those developers, but I get the impression that Ballistic Overkill has such a good following on Linux that it's pushing sales on other platforms.
I actually talked to a guy who had played Ballistic Overkill for so much that he's like on the top 10 list or whatever. And he said that there's like a recent resurgence for it because he's been playing it for quite a while. And turns out Ballistic Overkill was first released on Facebook games.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. I had no idea. Like it was named something else, but the guys who developed it said it started as a Facebook game. And then once the people who were paying for it decided not to use it, they bought the IP and all the stuff back so they could make a full game. And then they made a full game, and one of the things they used was Linux. And
nice.
That was interesting just by itself. But one of the players was saying that every time he sees someone new, he's like really happy to see it because it like gets to bring a new community. But he said like there's been like a resurgence sort of for like the gaming thing, and it's been the past few months. So I think Destination Linux should totally take credit for that.
I think so.
And,
we take over servers with Linux crews.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think yeah, I don't know. That's anecdotal. I don't know if that's a fact. But I think that sort of stuff helps. Is really getting behind the games that support Linux natively from the start, where the developers are keen to get it running and stuff. That helps.
So, Mark, if people are interested in following your work, or if they have questions for you, or maybe they want Rocket League tips, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, just not email. Just at me on Twitter. I'm M Di Luz, MDILUZ.
Yep.
On Twitter. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Nice.
Every now and then I give away random games that I still have on Steam, like because my Steam inventory is just full of games. So if you like, I don't know, I could pull it up now, but I've just got like so many stupid like games that I bought for like $1 during a Steam sale.
Well, that would be an interesting question. How many games does Marc Di Luzio have in his Steam library?
Oh, I can pull it up now. I've only got 500, you know.
What?
Only 500, and that's only 400 more than me.
It's not that much.
No.
I've got 500 of them, and 400 of them are Rocket League.
You know you can only play
Exactly.
one of them at a time.
Oh.
And 400 of them are DLCs and crates and stuff for Rocket League. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean that's not actually that many. I've got friends who got way more. The value of my Steam library is like £5,000 or something, which
Squids.
Squids.
5,000 squids.
Yeah. Which isn't really that much. I'd probably just mostly buy stuff when it's on sale.
Oh yeah, I count the retail price.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, it has been an awesome time talking with you. We appreciate you coming by and filling us in on everything you're doing, and hopefully you'll return sometime.
Yeah, hopefully. We'll see.
We'll see how this turns out, Rocco.
Yeah, exactly. Check the comments.
Right.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right, a big thank you to each and every one of you for watching and listening, however way you do it. We appreciate it. Zeb, take it away.
Yep, and a big thank you to all of our patrons out there who support us and help us produce this podcast. And any way that you do also support us, leaving your comments on the YouTube videos and sending us emails with all of your questions. It's that support that keeps us going, and makes it for a better show, because it ends up with those items that you want us to do for you. So thanks very much to all of the patrons.
Michael, what's that email?
That email is comments@destinationlinux.org.
Thank you.
Yes. And just so you know, most of the time our shows are streamed live on Twitch and YouTube. Ish, right? Ish. This particular one wasn't. Unfortunately, we forgot to ask Mark if he was okay with it until about 10 minutes before the interview happened. So
we didn't want to spring it on.
No, it just wasn't.
We didn't want to spring it on.
It's not his fault. It's our fault.
Yeah.
And, just to be clear. So this particular episode was not streamed live, but next week will be streamed live. So be sure to follow us on YouTube and Twitch to participate in that. But if you're a patron, you were able to watch this one live in the Zoom chat, and all episodes that are streamed live also have a post show and a pre-show that patrons can participate in, as far as using the zoom.us program.
All right. Thank you again, Mark. That'll wrap it up for us. Everybody have a great week. And remember, the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Destination Linux Podcast.
Welcome to Destination Linux. This week, we are not going to have a recording. Michael, why are we not going to have a recording? Or a live stream, I should say.
We should probably start over.
Let's start over. Okay.
I messed up your thing.
Welcome to Destination Linux. This week, we...
Why does he have to do that?
I'm sorry.
All right, I'll pause so you can get the ish in, okay?
Okay, thanks.
Welcome to Destination Linux.
Ish.
Why is it ish? Because we are not live streaming this week. Why, Michael?
Well, we're going to have an interview this week, and unfortunately, we neglected to ask him if he was willing to do it live. And it'd be kind of rude for us to ask him 10 minutes before we do.
Yeah, that would be pretty rude. PZ, we're going to be back next week.
We certainly are, and hopefully we'll have a good live show with you with lots of gaming and pixelated bits and pieces.
Right, and some Threadrippers.
Stop it.
Loads of news to keep you all entertained.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly.
Until then, everybody have a great week.
And remember, the journey itself is just as important as the thread ripper.
I don't think that's how it goes.
Not really?
Destination.
I'm going to have to disagree.
See ya.
Okay. Bye.
Are you ready?
Ish.
Ish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I need to pause at Destination Linux?
Ish.
Are you
Not
ready?
going.
Are you ready?
Yeah, son.
This is non-stop, by the way, Mark, through the whole show.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. Zeb does not just even take a moment, doesn't even take a breath to let us talk.
It's ridiculous. Because you definitely don't want Michael's name tag over Zeb.
Who would want that?
Yeah, right.
Who would want to admit that you're me?
I know.
Leave me alone. Okay, so you're complaining about 31 and 32, and I just looked it up. 95 in Fahrenheit is 35 in Celsius. That is what it is here currently.
But how humid?
What, in your office?
Well, I actually have a thing called an air conditioner.
Yeah, that's what we have over here in the U.S.
I've got the window open, so let's hope no dogs bark, because it's a balmy 31 in here, even with the fan going.
Air conditioner. Zeb,
I've
air
got the same
conditioner.
debate. I've got a window right here. It's like, like if a massive breeze arrives, someone tell me that you can hear a wind, and I'll just close the window.
Okay.
UK, Rocco, this happens once every 20 years.
Yeah, air conditioners don't exist in the UK. Like, we've never seen one.
I have mine running, just so you know.
Thanks a bunch. Makes me feel so much better.
It's I have it set to 67 actually. So
But that's pretty hot, actually. I don't know why you'd want your room at like water boils near that.
right. We don't use that
I see.
ridiculous measurement. that you
Yeah,
guys
we
use.
use freedom units, thank you. Thread ripper.
60 seconds. Go.
What?
What?